Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, in my continuing series on Jason Reza Jorjani, this is part 3, and I want to clarify things, and I think I have a better understanding for everybody's sake of who this buffoonish pseudo-intellectual is. And let's clarify exactly what he believes in. Well, ultimately, what he really is a Luciferian. So this is what he basically is pushing with his Promethean book, which is a what he considers a Luciferian figure. And of course, they try and distinguish Lucifer from Satan, which is difficult to do. And it tends to mix, and people's ideas of what the actual meaning of these things are and what the actual society meaning of them is that Lucifer and Satan are one. But of course, scholars don't look at it that way. That Lucifer was kind of the rebel that went out and challenged God's traditional society structure, which was basically bad and not working, bringing to a higher, better level. That's the Luciferian. But it's really not true. Luciferians are basically Satanists. They don't think, they hate what is considered the common good and want to go for the common bad. So it's very hard when you cross into these things to start this kind of understanding. So, and these Luciferians basically have this whole bizarre understanding of the world, and Masons tend to be Luciferian as well. That people got things wrong. It was Lucifer who was down here and helping people as well as the fallen angels. Well, I mean, this is a very skewed way of looking things. And because those people who have seized power are working through a false and distorted system of religion and other things, people want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. The basic philosophical understandings behind all of the major religions, past and present, were generally very good. It was the individuals, the humans that came in and perverted everything. Well, you're not going to pervert the outside societies, the cults, the hidden people. Well, what's the point of that? They are already outside. You have to worm your way in, infiltrate the power structures, and then destroy them from the inside out or seize power from them. That's how you do things. So, and it's kind of naive to think there's anything different. Now, Jorjani, Jason is quite a confused person. He's got this whole bizarre things working from a fantasist viewpoint that he wants to reconstruct an empowered society based on a lot of what is considered and part of an old doctrine, which is the Luciferian right-wing belief system, which basically is based in black magic and demonic practices. Ultimately, the Luciferian part that he wants to hold on to and ignore the rest of it is kind of silly. But you know, that's the kind of fantasist he is. So he's a Luciferian. His Prometheus book states this. And Prometheus was the hero who took fire from the gods and helped mankind with it. It's a pretty simplistic and not very unique way of looking at the world. Luciferianism and has been dealt with from these fascist scholars that he's a big fan of, particularly who escapes me at this point, an Italian, clearly states that he was involved in this a new look, and it was based in this fascist understanding of life through a background that is satanic in nature, with negative practices, etc. These Luciferians who were involved with Mussolini and others eventually wore the Satan cloak of the SS and didn't have any problem thinking that murdering people. So that's your Luciferian. Well, we're really the good guys. It's just that we're going to murder and torture tens of millions of people. And the SS were some of the most vulgar, disgusting scum on this earth, who, of course, are still running most of Europe with their Russian, Turkish allies. And, of course, that's who Jorjani is connected with. He's a Russian, basically a Russian, Turkish, German person. That's what he claims. He's Iranian or Persian, which basically is where the Germans come from. So he's in that background. He's got this made-up fantasist history, just like the Germans did with their creation, because there was no history. They're Arabs, and that's what they are, and that's what he is trying to state he isn't. So he wanted to take the right wing and move it into this Luciferian area and get it away from what was considered by him of just racism belief systems, which is a certain core of these right-wing people to a degree. But of course, that's given up by all of the control people, particularly the new Nazi Russian-Turkish alliance, which all work together as one basically Arabic community against the West. Now, he doesn't like Muslims and sees the world where he would prefer not to be Muslims. He sees the Muslims and the Turks as invading his original Persian empire, and these are usurpers, which is true based in ancient history. But it's like the American Indians saying, well, you know, this was our land first, and we're going to kick out all of the others that have come here after us and forced us. Well, whatever little stronghold you have right now certainly is not going to enable you to kick out overly super superior empowered people. You don't have a chance in hell. But that's what he's trying to do, and he wants to make agreements with the Turks to have this fantasist empire of Persian and the old religions without them interfering. Well, the absurdity of that is just beyond belief. But when you're a fantasist, when you have bogus pseudo-intellectual understandings of life, that's what you come up with. Just as thinking that Prometheus is some higher level, rejecting the common, which is what these people do because they don't want the laws of our society today. They don't talk about corruption who have perverted the good into the bad. They want to take over themselves and run in their very strange fascist understanding, as was done in throughout history through particularly the Italian occultist, whose name escapes me, who wrote these books on magic and everything else. And it's all based in left-hand path, demonic activities, perverse sexuality, etc. It goes into all of that. That's what Luciferian is all about. Now they're going to come and tell you it's not and everything else. Well, this is of course nonsense. You know, a pig's a pig. I don't care how you dress it and what hat you put on it. It's still a pig. And to try and make your fantasist viewpoint into something else is insulting everyone. But, you know, like so many overrated fantasists, pseudo-intellectuals that seem to impress the common populace, he's gotten away with that nonsense. So he wanted to go into the new right and wanted to take over with his pseudo-intellectualism with a bunch of people who are knuckle-dragging idiots and think that he would have some sort of effect on them. They brought him in because of his odd background and his abilities to write, because none of these people generally can. These radical groups, particularly the right, don't have too many skilled people there. They're going to write it. They wanted to bring him in. They wanted him to run things and him to be the poster boy, which of course is so insulting to it because, you know, he is an Arab. He is a Persian, and they are Arabs, plain and simple, regardless of the nonsense they want to tell you. So the point is that's exactly what he is. He's not an Islamist. He doesn't like Islam and sees them as a great threat because those are who invaded his country and who now run it, which are basically coming from the Turkish empires who are running most of the world today, or at least they are a major force in the Russian, Germanic, Turkish Federation that are running the world and who are out there as a major influencer. And of course, he doesn't get that apparently, like most right-wingers supposedly. But to think that you're going to eliminate all these things, and of course he seems to be a little bit cautious and afraid to talk against Islam. He uses a lot of code words, making it much nicer of the major atrocities, and of course he is not part of that. He sees the Islam as a great threat and their birth rate as a super terrible threat, and he's right. The bottom line is that he wants to get into his own belief system, which rejects the power structure who is supporting all this. Now, The bottom line is that instead of reforming, which works the best, and working within established groups, he wants to go out and get his own new torch, the Promethean torch of the actual fantasist reality that he wants to now have a new order of things because the old order doesn't work. Well, while I am sympathetic with that, the way he's going about it is a waste of time. It will never work. This is nothing new. This is something that's been going on for years and years. Right-wing movements never work and never have, and they will not. There's a huge pressure against these organizations, and basically they're mostly made up of a bunch of deviant type people, just like the Nazis were with their homosexual head of their Air Force, Galling, ooh, I have makeup on, the chicken farmer who failed, and all the other deviants and drug addicts that the Nazis were known for. And of course, he wants to relate to them because that's where he is connected to. So he sees that as some sort of thing that could bring people together against this Islamic threat. What he doesn't understand is that Islamic threat is being empowered by the people he thinks are his buddies. Secondly, he thinks that some of these ridiculous people out there will do anything. He hasn't obviously studied any of these right-wing fascist movements who have never achieved anything, particularly in modern time. These are people that are really nut jobs, and I've had a lot of contact with them. They will not organize together, they have no money, they don't support each other, and it's a futile group to do anything. The head spokesman for the alternative right, a female I read an article about recently, again, I'm not very good with names, came out and said what a useless group they were, how she got no support, how she couldn't even keep a boyfriend because the right-wing boyfriends she had were all losers who wouldn't work with her. They wouldn't help her with a dime. There's no money in it. And I'm sure that was the case with our buddy here, Jason, as well. When he started to get into bed with the Swedish guy to bankroll everything, I think it was a lot more than just philosophical differences. I think there was a lot of moolah differences. Old Swedish boy wasn't going to put money into supporting Jason here at the money that he needed to survive in his lifestyle, which would be quite high as a professor from a college in the past, making maybe close to $200,000 a year. I frankly doubt that the ultra-right were going to support him for that. As a matter of fact, I'm sure they expected him to donate his time for free. So I think there's a lot more than this than meets the eye, and there always is, but most people don't know the internal workings of organizations like this. I've had experience in there, and I know how these groups work, how every one of them work, and they've gotten absolutely nowhere. These supremacist type organizations have been around for 50 or 60 years now in a fairly well-known fashion and have gotten absolutely nowhere, mostly because the people involved with them are deviants and nut jobs. And he is part of these people living in his fantasist reality that he's going to change this with a option of going to Prometheus, basically going back to pagan Persian belief systems where everything came from. Everybody says that. It all came from there. All the stories from the Grail and everything else came from Persia, of course. Well, real knowledge and the advancement came from basically what we consider North and South America. Unfortunately, all of their important writings and so forth were destroyed. The greatest civilizations were there and can be proven, but there is nothing left, and because of their decay of society when they were conquered with their major human sacrifices, because they were taken over by groups that pushed that, they have no credibility whatsoever. But thinking that all these great civilizations came from Persia, known as the conquering place, they conquered a lot of the areas. They invented crucifixion, by the way, and impaling. The Persians of today, otherwise known as Iran, murder more people on this planet than anyone else but the Chinese. So they are a murderous Islamic society that has done and achieved nothing. So, and of course he agrees with that. He wants to move back in the ancient religions and bring back the philosophy and beliefs of the ancient Persians, which is absurd because you can never really go back. People are Christian, Muslim, etc., and that will never change. Those religions were propped up and pushed in society for the last 2,000 years at the end of a sword, and those who disagreed were murdered. So the only way he's going to take control back is using the same tactics, I should say. You're not going to convert people except by the sword. And of course, this is how all of Europe was converted to Christianity, and how all of the world was converted, that it is now, to Islam. So it's all done by the sword. This is a fact. And of course, he won't talk about any of this, and he won't talk about corruption, the real problem with life. He won't talk about any of this. He talks about Mithraism. And it's amusing that one of his little followers contacted me and asked me a question about Mithraism. Like that has any value in this. In the 21st century, which is a dead religion that unfortunately probably would have been much better if the Roman Empire would have instituted that. But they didn't want that kind of strong religion. They wanted a weak religion built on weak, subservient people, which was built through a general group of heavily involved with homosexuals to breed kind of a non-fighting, disruptive attitude, which is how Christianity was built on by a Christian who has to be questioned of whether he was homosexual or not, otherwise known as Jesus. So the whole idea is that the fantasist that he is a complete and total joke. So he wants to reassert this kind of belief system. And of course, that's totally up to him. But he's a Luciferian. He believes in this usurper God to get rid of those in power so that he can take power with a better and new idea. Well, isn't that what every revolutionary states? Mao stated it. Lenin stated it. They all state that they are the better answer. And he thinks that his pagan Persian religions and all the great things that they did, and Zoroastrianism and all the other stuff that has quasi-benefits or anything, they're all just stupid religions. Like all pagan religions are just as bad as regular religions. And they were meant to be archetypal in nature, meaning pagan religions gave you many gods so that you could draw on those energies to help you in your life. This became down to a one God syndrome, which really doesn't work. So, but if you're a fantasist, you have this whole usurping, let's bring this whole attitude where we can allow science to grow and everything else, which is being suppressed by the leadership we have now. Yeah, but most of that suppression is not connected with just our old ideas. It's connected directly and mainly through corruption. But apparently, Reza, Jorjani, the great intellect he is, or the pseudo scumbag he is, doesn't get the fact that it is not the system that is the problem. The system is corrupt. That's the problem. The checks and balances aren't there because there is no checks and balances, period. It is ran through payoffs and corruptions and the lack of governmental enforcement, otherwise known as law enforcement, and nobody within the groups will stand up to do anything because they're afraid of their pensions. They want the extra money they're being paid. This is the problem. People are not have these archaic belief systems by training alone. They have it because they are bought to do it. And he apparently doesn't get that, living in fantasy wealth that he does, from having a big-time professorship job, which is one of the most cushiest and intellectually stimulating jobs you can get, that produces nothing. Because colleges don't produce anything physical, as he never did. He spent his time where his students taught other students, writing books and putting out his philosophy. Now, that's how academia works. And he has a right to his opinions as long as he is not pushing that in his classrooms. If he wants to teach people his philosophies in his classrooms, well, that is something that he should be told not to do. And if he continued to do that, he should then be fired. From what I understand, that's not the case. His opinions and the books he writes is totally up to him, and if people want to follow that, that is up to them. So being persecuted over your opinions is god-awful and horrible. And of course, this is why he wants a new regime. And that regime, of course, is ran by him. The problem is you get rid of one dictator, and this has been seen in Africa in particular, and you replace it with another dictator who's usually worse than the old dictator. So it's pretty much nothing new. It's basically all the same. So we need to fully understand that and transcend past all that into a much higher level of thinking. And people are basically fooled by this pseudo-intellectual crap trap that is pouring out of his diarrhea consciousness, and they're impressed by his use of verbiage and the way he talks. Like people are impressed with Christopher Hitchens and Terence McKenna. These are all crap trap diarrhea mouth people that are saying a bunch of nothing, but doing it in a way that kind of seduces people because they're ignorant and can't see the forest for the trees, as the cliche goes. So, I mean, that's really where he's coming from. This whole Luciferian and pretty much the same exact philosophy that was taken by fascists pre-World War II, particularly the Italians, is what he's really embracing. And this is a dirty, shallow, perverted path. And when you give people the opportunity to be dictatorial and perverted, they will jump at it, as what happens through the entire fascist movements that have continued and were big during World War II. They achieved nothing. They were highly corrupt. Most of them were all deviants and drug addicts. Their philosophies lean and push towards everything's okay. If killing is something that the common governmental society doesn't like, well, that's because they're corrupt and don't get it. So we're going to kill people, but doing it in our belief system. This is endless. And the point is that Jorjani apparently is living in a fantasy world, and I really do believe he has. I mean, here he is going up through an educational system where he is a professor. He's a relatively young guy. I don't think he's seen any hardships in life whatsoever. He's also had the typical teacher problem. He's a little dictator, as all teachers are. They run their classrooms in that way. They have ultimate control over it. I'm sure that he does not allow for any dissent in his classrooms. But the classrooms are not there to open opinions, even though there may be some minor discussions, as I've had in schools. In the end, it's shut up and believe what I tell you and believe my systems. Now, for a guy who taught at a technical institute and other things, well, I wonder how much alternative science and openings he exposed students to. Most likely he taught everybody what was in the books and what he was told to do. Of course, now he doesn't like that when people are saying, well, we don't like what you're talking about. So all of this is absurd, and his lack of courage to confront corruption and to confront Islam in a much more head-on and direct fashion, like Christopher Hitchens did at least, is insulting. He won't do it. He's afraid. He used all sorts of terminologies for butchering and genocide that Islam is known for without really talking about it because he's afraid. He doesn't talk about the conquest of the Muslims or anything else to any great degree. He's very careful what he says there. Yes, he would like to see Islam out of Persia, but I certainly don't think that he wants to see it out of the world because he wouldn't have the courage to take that stand. The fact that he doesn't stress again the enormous birth rate of Islam, where they're slowly taking over the world, because he's too cowardice to do this, is another problem. He wants to push Prometheanism, the revolt against the gods' order, to his new contrived order without really dealing with issues that are critical, because that is a difficult thing to talk about and to get through without being labeled some sort of racist or other problem. So he deals with this in a backdoor manner. That means he has no credibility, he has no guts, and the bottom line is that he's nothing more than a classical, which has been going on for literally probably thousands of years, Luciferian. And people should look that up. Find out what Luciferianism is all about, even though there are many shades of Luciferianism of different degrees, from the jokey intellectual level, which is what Jason is on, to a very dark and deep satanic level where most of them come from. So this is something everyone should investigate and know about, and certainly not to get caught up in this pseudo-intellectual, diarrhea-spewing, fool's bogus, buffoonish talk that he's so good at. Until next time.